It's the day after the hottest day of the year here in the UK, and I'm sitting inside wearing knitwear and talking to you about knitting. And I think we can all establish that I have made some truly excellent life choices. Hello Pickles, and welcome to episode 25 of the Knitting Vicariously podcast. My name is Caroline. I'm found more commonly across Instagram and Ravelry as dunderknit. I am a knitter living in London, and if this is your first time joining us here on the podcast, a huge hello and welcome to you. As ever, a very quick word of warning up front to let you know that this is a swearing-friendly podcast, and therefore the language does get a little colourful. If that's not your bag, I totally appreciate it. This won't be the podcast for you, but for everybody else who has been around for a fair old while and knows exactly how we roll over here, I really hope you're well and welcome back. Yes, it's sunny. Yes, it's hot. Yes, it means I have the windows open and I do not have my stage lights on, and therefore the lighting and the ambient noise, there will be lots of all of it. And I apologise a little bit for that up front, but that is how we are going to need to roll. On the plus side, however, I am wearing some knitwear and I'm looking forward to telling you all about this a little bit later on. But before we get into that, a couple of key things for us to cover off up front. The first of those is a crucial conversation that's been taking place in the knitting and making community over the last week or so, since Ravelry announced that they were extending their ban on hate speech to include explicit support for white supremacy and the Trump administration. This came after a number of patterns that were racist and pro-Trump were published over on the site. These were then subsequently reported, but around about the same time, a number of individuals became significant targets of hate and harassment over a number of different social media and networking sites. And it shouldn't really come as a surprise to any of us to know that the majority of those makers were makers of colour. Those of you who followed the podcast over here for a while will know I'm not really one to shy away from talking about politics, and this is such a fundamental discussion. It's one that I couldn't avoid referencing right here and up front. It is very real, it is ongoing, it is an incredibly charged environment that we're in at the moment, and you know that you are in the midst of a truly crucial debate when the founders of Ravelry are being quoted everywhere from Time magazine to The Guardian here in the UK. And it's a really, really fundamental thing for us to be addressing here within the community. You also probably know that I'm pretty liberal in my stance, and therefore not only am I incredibly supportive of this move by Ravelry to make theirs a more inclusive and safer community, but also that in order to do so, they have to put an end to the hate speech, to the intolerance, and to the politics that are currently espoused by the current president of the US, whose views are unquestionably supremacist in their approach. But I want to make it clear that supporting Ravelry here really is only part of the equation. We have seen in the last 6 months some really huge change within the knitting community, and that has been driven largely by voices of makers of colour, by LGBTQ plus makers, by differently abled makers. It has been about creating a more representative, more inclusive and more welcoming community, and it's fair to say it's been a difficult discussion for us to have. We are by no means at this divine endpoint of these discussions. We are right in the mire, in the centre of it all. But I do think it is truly, truly thanks to the makers of colour and of different backgrounds and previously marginalised groups and continuingly marginalised groups who are making their voices heard, making a stand, often at quite significant personal risk, and putting themselves out there. And it's that is really starting to drive forward change in our community, however incremental that change may be. Now, I know there's been a little bit of discussion, dialogue and contention around the notion of being inclusive, and that by banning or excluding certain groups or types of speech over on Ravelry, that this might actually be creating more of a problem than it is trying to solve. I will confess that I had an initial gut reaction when I read the news on the Ravelry pages to think, is this the right way of going about this? Are we really actually starting to forge better, more inclusive dialogue in excluding part of the conversation? But here's the thing about tolerance and about inclusivity, is that in order to ensure that you are representing the greater whole, that you are bringing in and giving equal and representative weighting to the different voices that exist, you cannot possibly include intolerance in that space. You can't have hate speech. You can't have dialogues in place that actively tell certain groups to be quiet. That is not the way that you go about creating this kind of dialogue. And therefore, if you want to ensure that those discussions are truly representative and that you are creating that safer space, you can't be in an environment where there's a pattern that clearly has the words "build the wall" trending on the top few pages of Ravelry's pattern pages. Now, Ravelry have been incredibly clear in their statement that they are not banning conservative politics. This is not about Republicans, Democrats. It's not about McCarthyism. It's not about trying to bring a new kind of socialist or liberal agenda to the world. It is explicitly about banning hate speech. And if you are uncertain or unclear on any of this, I urge you to go and to read the policy in full over on their pages. And to that point, I want to make it clear that I will be doing something similar over here on Knitting Vicariously. I will be keeping an incredibly close eye on the comments over on this video, as well as in the Ravelry group. And so this again is not about me choosing to disagree with your politics. It is about me taking ownership of this space and making it very clear that I will not tolerate hate speech or any kind of language that marginalises and oppresses the experiences of others. If that means that you wish to unsubscribe from this channel, you are more than welcome to do so. If you wish to noisily unsubscribe from this channel, then you are welcome to use the thumbs down button initially here below this video. Anything other than that, if you do choose to spend time in the comments, please do be aware that your comments will be moderated. Those of you who follow me over on Instagram may well also have seen the post that I made earlier on this week where I showcased a t-shirt that I happened to be wearing actually almost this time last year to coincide with the current US President's trip over to the UK. But in doing so, I also mentioned in that post that for every follower that I had lost in between coming out in support of Ravelry last weekend and around about now, that I would be making donations to the ACLU over in the US and Liberty UK. Both of those are fantastic organisations that fight for civil liberty rights for those both oppressed, marginalised groups in the US and the UK. And I'm delighted to say that I will be making donations of £110 to each of those organisations. And I'm very, very glad that those donations will be going to organisations that should be able to help to make positive gains in this space. But just on that point, I know that I have some incredible friends this week who have been wading in complete with elbows to the debate and really starting to engage and debate points with a number of different groups, individuals, and having some really very difficult conversations. I am very, very conscious that in making the post that I have, in stating that I wanted to make donations, I've received some really genuinely lovely feedback from that, but I do want to make it incredibly clear. So I posted that post around making donations and so on quite late at night when I was about to go to bed. I knew I was going to struggle to keep tabs on it the next day, so I closed comments on that post. And what I will say is that I accept that both closing comments and that by making the donation and using that as my kind of engagement tool of choice both of those come from a position of privilege. That is a privilege that I have, that I'm able to enact, to say, I choose not to engage with people on this in case it's contentious and I'm not able to make this a safe space, and I choose the fact that I have the means to be able to go and make a donation, and that will be my contribution to this conversation. I am very, very conscious that those things are elements of privilege that I have, and there are many others who have taken on this incredibly challenging discussion in ways that are infinitely worthier of praise than I am. And so I want to make it very, very clear. I'm delighted to be doing these things. I need to do more. We all need to do more. We can all do more. This week, there are so many people who've been hit incredibly hard by this debate, whether it is makers of colour who have been targeted and who've been forced to go private on different social networks, whether it is members of the LGBTQ+ community who, in speaking out for Pride this month, have been the target of hate speech there too. I am incredibly grateful to you for continuing to speak out. My heart goes out to you in the knowledge that you are having a truly shitty time of it at the moment. And I can only say thank you for the work that you're doing and that you're continuing to do to help to make this community safer. And I, for one, look to stand with you and try and do the same. So yes, a rather serious start to this week's podcast, but things that definitely needed to be said. But on a slightly lighter note, I mentioned a little bit impromptu on the last episode that I was thinking of having a knit along. Now this is prompted by the fact that I've confirmed that I'm going to be heading back to Rhinebeck later on this year, and I'm incredibly excited about that. But I also mentioned that in the knowledge that there are a few people at events and general kind of knitting get-togethers who don't always feel super confident to come up and introduce themselves, but still want a means of kind of giving a very quick hi and a nod to the fact that they are watching the podcast and enjoy it. I did think about what if we potentially did a little bit of a gold make-along. Now, the response to this was overwhelmingly very positive, which I'm very grateful for, even though it means that some of you are perhaps stretching your definition of gold. My definition of gold is broad enough for all of us, but you being very kind of narrow-minded in your goldest views, I mean really, we just need to be more expansive in our thinking. But what I will say is that for the most part, there were a few things that people wanted clarity on, so let me be a little bit clearer now that I've had a chance to think it through. So what I'm thinking is, wouldn't it be nice if we all took part in a bit of a glorious gold along? And what that means is you could knit, make, buy, wear anything that you like, but in some way celebrate gold and the fact that gold is somewhat inexorably linked to the Knitting Vicariously platform, thanks to my obsession. But as part of that, what it would mean was we would be working on something or having something in place around about Rhinebeck weekend, which is the 18th to the 20th of October this year. Those of you who are travelling to Rhinebeck would be entirely welcome to wear or have about your person something that is the requisite gold colour, and that you could use that, should you so wish, as a means of kind of nudging your allegiance or enjoyment of the platform without necessarily having to introduce yourself or say hello in person. It would also mean to those of you who are not able to travel to Rhinebeck that you would be able to celebrate Rhinebeck vicariously, as is the very nature of all that we do here. And so what I'm thinking, to be abundantly clear, is that we are going to have a glorious gold along that will kick off as of tomorrow, which is the 1st of July, because I like round numbers and it gives us all plenty of time to work on whatever we want to work on ahead of October. It will run until Rhinebeck weekend, and therefore you've got a huge amount of time to do whatever you like around it. But essentially, it's just an opportunity for us to play around with gold things. The idea being you could knit a garment, you could knit a sweater, you could knit an accessory, you could knit a tiny contrasting colour on an accessory, you could knit a stuffy toy, you could have a badge, you could crochet an accessory, you could buy a shop bought gold thing from a store and use that as a little like whatever you like, whatever you feel. The intention is really just one around let's use my enthusiasm and effusiveness for all things gold and the broad definition I have of that as a means of celebrating the fabulous, fabulous folks that engage with and watch and really kind of help to make this channel all that it is. I will be opening a thread for our glorious Gold Along over in Ravelry. It's going to be incredibly informal. There probably won't be prizes and there won't be a separate FO thread. It's just going to be a general space for chatter and for all things gold. So if you want to pop in there and say, is this gold enough? Is this too gold? How broad in definition are we talking? Or if you want to pop in with some ideas for things that you might make, then feel free to do so. It is going to be fast and loose over there, I promise you that. And on the subject of Ravelry forums, I will mention where they are. We have the Knitting Vicariously podcast group over on Ravelry. You can find us, as ever, by searching for Knitting Vicariously in the groups tab on Ravelry. You can also find the Instagram account linked to the podcast over on Instagram by searching for Knitting Vicariously, and over there I post links and hashtags that are relevant to each and every episode as it goes live. But really, it is about time that we address the white elephant, white horse elephant, white grey elephant sweater in the room, because it's getting a little bit toasty and I feel as though I should address it sooner rather than later. And so let me tell you about what I'm wearing this week and the finished object that I happen to have about my person, because this is the White Horse sweater by Caitlin Hunter. I'll put her picture of it up here on the screen and you'll be able to see her pattern picture version of it. I do want to talk about that pattern picture in a little bit more detail in a second or two, but yeah, here we have it. It is finished, it is done. I'm going to move my hair out of the way so that you can see a little bit more of this beautiful yoke, and I will stand up to give you a full twirl. So here you have it. Here is my finished White Horse sweater, and as you can see, I did keep things a little bit short sleeved. I'll talk about those in a minute or two. You can see this beautiful yoke that I have here, and you can see that this finishes pretty much bang on mid-hip, as is my jumper length of choice. The main difference that I made with this sweater is the ease. This is designed to be knit with at least a couple of inches of ease, and I knit it pretty much bang on 0 ease, so you will be able to see it is sort of semi-fitted without being hugely fitted. The sleeves have a little bit of room in them, which is pretty much perfect, and the sweater itself is pretty much bang on my bust size. It did block out a tiny bit bigger, so it has relaxed a tiny bit, but certainly nothing too extreme in terms of it growing in length. Now, the yoke is the star of the show, so let me just scoot a little bit closer and you will be able to see, excuse the sort of slight shadow that you've got from the camera there, and you'll be able to see there are these kind of sections where there are tiny little bubbles, bubble, and then fan sections, and then some more bubbles, and then fan here, being very cautious about my hand movements, but let's just take a moment because why not? White horse boobs. But what you have then is you have these kind of alternating panels the whole way around, so you've got bubbles and fans and bubbles and fans, and it's really clever. There are increases built in, so you move really seamlessly from the ribbing here at the top all the way out, and it's incredibly well done. You can see also I've got a few little bubbles up here on my shoulders and a bit more lace, and I am wearing a camisole, so you can sort of see the point at which that starts, and because otherwise that would be intimate. But yes, I really do love this. I have, oops, creaky, I followed the pattern for the ribbing at the bottom here as well, and likewise for the ribbing around here. It is a 2x1 as opposed to being a 2x2, and so you can see that there. It is knit in reverse stockinette on the body, so you can see here that this is the reverse stockinette, whereas the inside is stockinette. But from here downwards, the body of the sweater is knit inside out, so you are making all knit stitches as opposed to purl stitches, which is very much what kept me sane. But yeah, the sleeves I'm particularly pleased with. These are really bang on perfect for me lengthwise, and let me sit down and I'll tell you a little bit more about them. Yes, so here we go. So the sleeves were actually sleeves that I was going to knit to be around about 3/4 length as per the pattern, except a couple of weeks ago now, maybe 2 weeks ago, I tried on the sweater. I had it about sort of 2/3 the way knit on the body, and I put it on an extra cable, tried it on, and discovered I actually quite liked the length that the sleeves were coming up. I just finished the lace, and I think you knit maybe an extra row or two on the sleeves before you separate for the sleeves. So this was on waste yarn, and I looked at it and kind of thought, I quite like that. So what I've ended up doing is just knitting another, I think I knit around about 35 rows. I do this weird thing, I don't know if anyone else does it, where I like doing things in sort of 5s or 10s or even numbers and so on. But if I'm knitting an arbitrary number of rows and I know I want it sort of roughly one length, I generally choose a number that's kind of relevant to me. So the fact that I'm 35, I was a bit like, yeah, 35 rows. I don't know if anyone else does that. It's kind of weird, but it works for me. It does mean that I was then able to remember it for the other sleeve, which let's face it, that's half the fucking battle with me some of the times. But yeah, so arbitrary 35 rows, but there we go. And then proceeded to knit the ribbing round here as well. Now, I think, again, because arbitrary, I decreased 4 times on here, and that was just a really simple kind of knit 1 stitch and then knit 2 together, go the whole way around, slip, slip, knit, knit 1 stitch to the end of the row. Actually, that's a lie. That's not how I do it. Because if I did it that way, then your decreases would kind of be like that. What I tend to do is I'll do my first decrease at the very end of the row before. So I will do a slip, slip, knit, knit 1. Then I'll move my marker to indicate the beginning of the round, and then I'll do knit 1, knit 2 together. I don't know if anyone else does that. That's the way that my mind works. Otherwise, they're always going to be like that the whole way up, because you're then knitting a full circle and then that, and then it's just going to... Anyway, I'm rambling now. But there we go. So I did 4 lots of decreases just on the sleeves, just to help it taper in a tiny bit. You can see that, as I say, they're still not tight in the slightest. And if anything, there's maybe sort of a slight... I could have gone down a little bit more, but I quite like it, to be honest. But yeah, I'm really pleased with this. The yarn that I used, as I have mentioned previously, is Deep, Deep, Deep Stash. This is Rowan's Felted Tweed. It's roughly a DK weight, and this is in their grey mist colourway, so you can see that it is for the most part a beautiful neutral grey. It does have these tiny little spots and speckles of light blue tweed in there as well, which I really, really like. It has softened up a little bit with blocking. I have blocked the sweater. It is fair to say that it has certainly bloomed a little, so it is sort of softer and a bit floofier than it was before. It is still the tiniest bit itchy, and only just in the sense that every now and again I just want to do that. That's it. That's it. That's not that bad. And I have a princess neck, so you know, I think we're going to be fine with this, let's be honest. But no, I adore this sweater. I mentioned that I knit it with 0 ease. I knit the size 44-inch bust, which is pretty much bang on my bust size, but I will confess I actually went down a needle size. So I believe the pattern requests that you knit it in a US size 6, which is a 4mm, and a US size 4 for the ribbing, which is a 3.5mm. I used a size 3.75, which is a US size 5. Now, I don't feel it necessarily made a huge difference, but it certainly ensured that when it came to the body of the sweater, that it was 0 ease rather than any positive ease. And yeah, I will confess I preferred the fabric when I was knitting this up as well. Now, the yarn has bloomed a little bit, and it obviously makes it a little bit easier and a little bit more kind of robust in terms of the fabric, but certainly when I was knitting it on a 4mm, I wasn't super impressed with how it was knitting up. So that worked for me, going down a needle size. So yeah, size large. It was all knit on my Chow-gu needles. Chow-gu needles are very much my favourite needles for any kind of sweater knitting. And yeah, I have to say I'm really, really genuinely pleased with how this has turned out. I'm trying to think if I made any other modifications to this. I really don't think I did at all. The pattern is very, very clearly written. Caitlin Hunter's patterns are generally excellent. There was a tiny bit of confusion when it came to what I needed to do in order to knit the body inside out. That's the only thing. And it is as simple as you finish knitting one row, or I think you're purling that one row, and then she says basically sort of flip it inside out and then just start knitting. So obviously you're going to be going back on the stitches that you just immediately purled, and so there will be a tiny little hole there. But in all honesty, I think I changed, I think I added a new skein not too long after that, so all I did is I made sure that there was a long enough tail for me to then just come in and sort of sew up that gap, which I subsequently did, and it's absolutely fine. You can't spot it in the tiniest. So yeah, I'm really, really pleased. I know there's a few folk who mentioned that they hadn't necessarily given this sweater much of a look in, but perhaps seeing it tried on or styled slightly differently was maybe giving them a little bit more of an appetite to look into it. I have to confess, it's exactly where my head was at. I had seen quite a few people knit this with positive ease. I wasn't super keen on it, but and that's not to say anything of your aesthetic. It looks wonderful on so many people who've done that. I just knew it wouldn't look right on me, but it wasn't really until I saw someone else who'd done it on Ravelry, and I wish I could remember who it was. I think it was on Instagram actually, which is probably why I can't find it anymore, because these things do move and disappear and all these things. But yes, it was only when I saw a version of it there that I thought, I really like that. And as I've mentioned with my other favourite sweater being my Siri, which also has a texture joke, it's definitely something that works for me. So I would contemplate re-knitting this. I think I want to wait until a little bit later in the year and see how much wear I get out of this version before I commit to wearing to knitting up a second, not least because I'd like to see as to kind of whether I'd want to go for a long sleeved version and so on. But no, in the meantime, I am bloody delighted with this thing, and yeah, all good. Another finished object. Haha. But you know how it goes. You can't possibly cast off one sweater without then thinking about casting on a new one. And yes, of course, I could have gone back to any of the multitudes of whips that I already have in progress, but where would be the fun in that? And so I cast on a sweater that has been front of mind for quite a while. It's not the first time you've heard me mention it over here on the podcast, although I'm conscious that doesn't really narrow it down. It is living at the moment in my Tanny Casey bag. I know I showed this last time, but don't let that fool you, because it's not what you think it is. This is a fabulous project bag by the wonderful maker that is Tanny Casey. She's based over in Philadelphia in the US and makes truly wonderful drawstring bags. And this one happened to be free, and I know I mentioned it last time with regards to the Novelli tee, but that's not what this is. I have seen so many of these sweaters cropping up over on Instagram, on Ravelry. I've featured a couple of finished item versions of them over here on the podcast, certainly one of them that I can remember in fairly recent weeks. And I've wanted one of my own for a very, very long time, and so I would love to showcase a brand new whip, and it is my version of Shay Johnson's As If Tee. I will put her pattern picture over here on the side of the screen so that you can see it in all of its glory. You will recognise this, we've talked about it here previously, and I am so delighted to be working on this. Now, Shay has recently re-released this pattern. It is the As If Tee version 2.0, and that is to allow for some extended sizing that she has added in there too. And so now her pattern ranges from a 40-inch bust up to a 60-inch bust. Now, while that may sound a little bit large on the smaller end of the scale, this is a pattern that is designed to be worn with a fair bit of positive ease, and so definitely worth looking at and considering flies. If this is something that you want to work on, I will confess that I have been desperate to work on one of these for a while, and it was really just a question of finding the right yarn. So I did a little bit of stash diving, and I had a bit of a think about what was perhaps missing from my wardrobe, and I settled on one very particular colour, which is this. So it's going to be a little bit difficult to see, but if I hold it up to the camera, you will get blown out in its entirety. I'm sort of looking for a happy medium between these two, and that's not it. Maybe this is it. Maybe this is closer. This is yarn that has been in my stash for quite a long time now. This is Madeline Tosh BFL Silk, and it is in the Nocturne colorway. It is the same color that I used for my original And She Was sweater, which is very similar to the As If Tee in its name, and so I feel as though there's a definite synergy that's happening here, but it is the same colour that I used for my original version of Yelena's And She Was sweater. It's a really good navy. Now, again, Madeline Tosh, I talk about this repeatedly, but obviously I'm still not making any further purchases from their site at the moment. That being said, I do know that they came out in support of Ravelry this week fairly unequivocally, and that obviously makes me very, very happy. I'm delighted that they have taken that particular stand, and so certainly again continuing to make positive moves. Now, still, I'm not inclined to purchase yarn from them. That's a personal choice at this point in time, on the basis that I don't really have a need to purchase any yarn at the moment, and for all that that's never really stopped me before, I think just in terms of my headspace, I'm still in the process of wanting to make more conscientious and more, I guess, kind of considered purchases. And so again, if this is something that absolutely floats your boat, I'm not going to recommend that you don't purchase it, but at the same time, I just want to make it clear that for all I'm knitting it with it right now, it's not necessarily a completely explicit endorsement, to be clear, or as clear as I can be when I'm rambling. I have turned into a bit of a pale and pasty ghost at this point from holding this up, but hopefully if I hold it back here, you should be able to see. The pattern itself is knit from the bottom up. You start with the ribbing down here at the bottom, and then you knit in stockinette up to the point where you are joining in the mohair. Now, the mohair I did purchase. I was going to try and knit it from stash, and then I just thought, no, I really want one in navy, and therefore this yarn leapt into my hands, and so I thought, well, now I need some navy mohair, and then I had to go out and find some navy mohair, and then I found this, and it's beautiful. And this is some kid mohair silk from Ching Fibres. That is a London-based dyer who is just renowned for doing some truly, truly stunning colorways. So Ching Fibre, hand dyed in the UK. This is her Okinami color, and it is 70% kid mohair, 30% silk, and it is truly beautiful. I would say this is a dark teal rather than a true navy, and if I hold it up, you will be able to see that there is a slight difference in the color, but given that this is mohair and it is going to be held as a single strand, I expect that the two are going to look fairly close by the time that the mohair is actually being knitted up. And if there is a slight difference between them, I'm sure I'll be able to make it work. But no, I'm really looking forward to getting to the mohair section of this design. You can see that I have here a couple of cakes of the BFL silk. I will confess, I'm playing a little bit of yarn chicken at the moment. I reckon I am maybe coming up to halfway through knitting these cakes, and I'm definitely, oops, before I drop everything on the floor, I've definitely got a little bit more of this to go. It is intended to be knit cropped. I'd like it to not be quite as cropped, but I think we'll just need to play it by ear a little bit. So we shall see how I continue to get on with that. In terms of sizing, I am knitting, let me just double check. In terms of sizing, I am knitting size 4, which is coming out at a 46-inch bust, and that is going to give me a little bit of positive ease, but not too much. Again, I want something that is quite fitted around my sort of widest bust point, for want of a better expression, and therefore went for something that just had a couple of inches of positive ease. But yes, I am going to be continuing on with this. As I mentioned, the body of the sweater calls for Aran weight yarn. I'm holding 2 strands of fingering weight together, which is giving me pretty much bang on gauge in terms of needles. I am using the recommended needle size, which is a 4.5mm or a US size 7. They're Chogus because of course they are, because that's what I do. And yeah, I'm really enjoying working on this so far. It's fair to say that the wealth of stockinette at the moment has very much captured my attention. It's been another couple of crazy weeks, and therefore head down, stockinette, knit away is pretty much exactly where my head is at. But I did want to share one other thing, for although it's not exactly something that I've been working on, I just really want to share it. So those of you who have been watching the Knitting by Curious channel for a little while now, particularly back into the tail end of last year, and those of you who caught some of my Vlogmas episodes will know that one knitter who is very near and dear to my heart is the fabulous Amy Florence of the Stranded podcast. She is a hugely talented dyer, she is a fabulous knitter, and an all-round excellent friend. And Amy is someone who, if you do watch her podcast, you may be aware of this, but I don't know, she kind of keeps it under wraps. Amy has a circular sock machine, and you might be aware of it, you might not. I just wonder what brand it is. Yeah, don't know, you'd have to ask her. Ask her. But sorry, slight in-joke for there. But Amy came to stay with me a few weeks back now and was so kind, as she always is. So I should mention at this point, the room that I film in, so with the stash and everything here, this is also a guest bedroom. And so I've got a sofa bed in here, which is where folk come to stay. Generally, a lot of the folks who come to stay are kind of into knitting, and therefore it's a great environment for them. If they're not into knitting, a bit more of a mixed bag. You do have to deal with the inevitable, but why do you have so much yarn questions that come your way, which knitters never ask, and I'm very grateful for that. But yes, when Amy came to stay, I was, you know, as we do, kind of talking about a few things that we'd purchased recently, pulling a few things out of the stash, and she made me a genuinely wonderful and truly kind offer, which was, well, you know, if you've got any skeins of sock yarn that you'd like me to knit up on the circular sock machine, then I'll do that for you. At which point, I think the noise that I made was something along the lines of, yes, please, thank you, yes, please, thank you. And then promptly started pulling skeins left, right and centre out of the top row that you can't quite see, which is where a lot of my sock yarn lives. Now, you will be aware that I've not been on a big sock knitting kick for quite a while now, and therefore I've been looking rather forlornly at some of the stuff that I've got in that shelf up at the top, thinking, soon my pretties, soon. But it's fair to say it's been a while since I've knit some socks, but this felt like the perfect opportunity, and so off she went, and she took a couple of skeins with her, and so kindly, and far quicker than I was expecting on the basis of the fact girl has shit to do, she has sent me back a beautiful little package of sock snakes, and look at it. Oh, isn't it the best? Isn't it the actual fucking best? Yeah, I'm gonna show you these, but so 4 skeins of sock yarn, knit up into a sock snake. Frankly, the prettiest fucking thing I think I've seen in quite some time, and I'm just gonna show these off to you. So I'm gonna take full, you know, kind of credit for these being a whip, because it's my yarn, let's be honest, and yeah, just because someone else knit it on someone else's circular sock machine, I mean, I don't feel like I should be penalised for that, let's be honest. So yeah, we're gonna talk you through this, but can we just, like, again, just appreciate it's so pretty. So let me give you a very quick run through of some of the yarns that we have knit up in here. The first of these is from a fabulous dyer that I'm delighted to call a friend of mine. Although we have not yet met in person, this will be changing later on this year. Megan is the dyer behind Lush Knit. Lush Knit is a yarn company that she started a few years back now, and I think Megan has been on a little bit of a dyeing hiatus for a while now. We are incredibly hopeful that at some point it might bring her enough joy that she will come back to it, because she is ludicrously talented, and let this just be the first indication of that. Megan is someone who is incredibly passionate about music. That came across in a lot of the names that she gave to some of the colorways that she had, and this is one of my personal favorites, which is When Doves Cry, obviously in honor of the fabulous artist that was Prince, and it is purple and black and neutrals and sparkly, and it is just stunning. So I am delighted to have this knit up and for these to be socks at some point. I should mention, so what Amy has done, because, you know, whatever, just girl's got a sock machine, she can just bash these out, no problem at all. She put a fabulous little bit of scrap yarn here on at the end, and then just cranked out the full tube, the full snake, up to this section where she put in a little bit more. And now all I need to do, as if I'm going to do it really soon. I mean, I might, you never know, is just unpick what I've got here, and then at some point within the tube as well, work out how long I want each of the socks to be, and then I will put in afterthought heels, cuffs and toes. And again, I'm saying all this like someone who's super old-handed it. I've never done it before, but it'll be fine. In all seriousness, I've done afterthought heels before. I've never done the version where you have to cut the yarn to do it, but I think it sounds like fun, so I am very much on board with that. As and when I do get the urge to finish some of this stuff off, I will definitely be just talking a little bit more about how I do this. These certainly feel like very, very long tubes for socks, so I might just need to consider exactly how long I want them to be, and we will go from there. But yeah, so first up we have this fabulous colorway, which is When Doves Cry. The next one, oh my god, you guys, this colorway has my heart in a way that I cannot possibly describe. This is also Megan's yarn, and it is one of the most joyful colorways I have ever seen. This is one of those colorways that you see it and you know you have to have it in your life. You don't care what you're going to make with it. You don't care that you don't necessarily have an immediate pattern or a project for it. You just know that it needs to be in your house, and it's just because it looks like this. I mean, come on! Isn't this one of the most joyful things you've ever seen? This is a colorway that Megan dyed called Fields of Joy. And for all that I'm not necessarily an orange person, which I know is going to strike you as odd given how wildly I define everything as gold, orange isn't necessarily something that appealed to me, but I couldn't not. This is just, it's beyond amazing. And so I have another couple of her colorways that are similar but not quite as kind of peachy. This definitely has some strong peachy tones to it. I love the little flecks of black that are in here too. I mean, seriously, girl is good. But yeah, so another skein of Lush Knit in the Fields of Joy colorway, and again, this is one where this is on her 75-25 base. It's definitely a little bit more kind of sturdy. It will make amazing socks, and I want this on my feet so bad because just, oh, seriously. So yeah, that needs to happen at some point. Next up, another fabulous skein of yarn. I'm getting all sock snake tangled up in here. Those of you who watched my Vlogmas over Christmas will know that I had an advent calendar, a yarn advent calendar from Cat Sandwich Fibres. She is one of my very favourite dyers, and so I knew that when Amy made the very kind offer that being able to get one of her skeins knit up for some socks was definitely something I wanted to look at. And so look look at this piece of micro striping joy. This is her Aurora Borealis colorway. It is stunningly beautiful, as you can see, between these little stripes of very dark navy, the pops of very bright teal blue. There are some pink speckles and some reds in there too. There are some more neutral stripes, and it's just beautiful. Beautiful. Again, I'm pretty sure this is a 75-25 base, so it feels good and sturdy and will be a great use of socks. Very excited about this. And then last but certainly by no means least, I have a little skein of self-striping that I purchased. I think I purchased this tail end of last year sometime after discovering this dyer, and this is a UK based dyer. This is some BFL nylon in the Lanterns colorway. Look at how pretty it is. Look at it! And this is by the Yarn Badger, who one, has a truly excellent shop name, and two, clearly dyes up incredible self-striping colorways. The pinks and the reds in here really do have my heart, as well as the slightly more muted rainbow tones and some of the sage greens. This crazy little one here, this crazy little burst of neon green that crops up some way through it after the rest of it is also beautiful and muted. It's just, I mean really. And so I will say, you know, for all that I can take really zero credit for the fact that these are now knit up into tubes, and the fact that I am trying to vainly and very vaguely suggest that they might be works in progress, I cannot express to you my delight at having a couple of yarns knit up so that I can see them in a very different light from within my stash. And the joy that this is bringing me is just boundless, I will tell you that much. So at some point I will definitely be working these up into socks. The fact is that a lot of the hard work is very much done for me, and again I am incredibly grateful to the wonderful Amy Florence for creating these beautiful these beautiful socks snakes of glory, such that I might be able to get the most out of these skeins sooner rather than later. But yeah, really pleased with this. And so that is what I've been working on this week. Moving along into some vicarious knitting, there are definitely a couple of patterns that have caught my eye. The first of those is by a wonderful designer who lives pretty locally to me, or at least in the grand scheme of things. This is a new design called the Miara sweater. I'll put a picture of it up here on the screen so you can see it, but this is a new sweater design from the wonderful Renee Callahan, who is East London Knits. Renee has a podcast, and so I would highly recommend you checking it out. She does some wonderful kind of talks on there. She talks about a range of topics. She occasionally has guests on there too. I would definitely recommend you taking a look at her podcast. But this sweater, oh my word. Yes, it's all over colour work, and yes, that is going to be ambitious, but oh, it's just so beautiful. I love the scalloped nature of the design. I love the fact that she's used a few different colours. There's a slight gradient feel to it. It just looks so beautiful. As ever, Renee had a number of different knitters test knit her versions, and it's great to see it not only in a range of colours but also on a range of sizes as well. Renee's pattern is designed to fit from a 27.5-inch bust up to a 59-inch bust, and therefore in terms of sizing and inclusivity you would have to look a long way to be able to find something that does quite as great a job as that. So a fantastic effort in being able to be very inclusive in its sizing there. Renee's original version is knit in Walcott Opus yarn, and I will say, for all that I have not yet knit with my Opus, I have two sweater quantities of it. One of it is in grey and the other is in the beautiful gold colourway because, I mean, obviously. But it is beautifully soft yarn. It is a blend of alpaca and merino. It is incredibly drapey and lovely, and I cannot wait to work with it. So this is a pattern, it is designed for sport weight, which the Walcott Opus is a kind of fingering to sport weight, and it would be stunning knit up in this pattern. So if you're in the market for that, if you like the look of it, I would highly recommend that you pop over on Ravelry and give it a closer look. The other pattern that caught my eye this week, I will confess, is similar to something else you've seen here before, and I use that as a means of really kind of cementing the fact that I know my aesthetic, as opposed to being just blithely repetitious over here. But you will have heard me talk previously about the Poet sweater that was published in one of the latest editions, I think maybe issue 4-ish of Lina magazine, not too long ago. It's a pattern by Sari Nordland, and she has just announced that she is coming out with a different version of her Poet sweater, which is going to be called the Poetria sweater, I believe, pronunciation, who can say. But this is going to be a version that has mohair included where it is held together with the original yarn. It's also, from what I've seen, as I don't think it has been released just yet, it looks as though it's got a slightly different neckline, which has me very interested because, again, if you recall, that was one of the main questions that I had around the pattern. It's something I knew I was going to have to modify in order for it to sit in the way that I wanted it to on my neckline. So very excited about that. I'll include the picture that she popped over on Instagram up here on the screen so you can see it. There have been some test knitters. One of those test knitters happened to post its picture over in our Ravelry group. I believe that was Mariana57, and apologies if I have butchered your name, but seeing your picture up on the Ravelry group definitely triggered my interest in this again. I had caught sight of it over on Instagram already, but now I am even more excited and anticipating the release of this pattern, so I'm very much on the lookout for that as well. And indeed, on the subject of patterns that I've seen over in our Ravelry groups, my word, you have been doing such a sterling job of just continuing to make amazing finished objects, and I'm going to give a particular shout out to those of you that are in the southern hemisphere at the moment, not least because it's been biblically warm here in Europe in the last few days. I'm guessing the US as well is experiencing somewhat of a heat wave at the moment, and therefore our friends from down under are certainly holding up a high bar in the meantime. And on the subject of those, one of the very first patterns that caught my eye, finished objects that caught my eye in our Show Us Your Actual Knits thread on the Ravelry group, is a sweater by the Pommy Knitter, and it is the Denez sweater, and I believe this is a pattern by Jess, I think it's Schreibstein. And it is such a beautiful example. So knit in navy, which I'm having a bit of a thing with at the moment, I think we've established that, but more importantly, knit in woolfolk far. So this must be like rubbing kittens all over yourself in a way that is not as sinister as it sounds, for all that I now have helicopters flying over my house. It's fine, I'm assuming it's unrelated. Yeah, we're good. But yes, so this must be the most beautifully soft thing to wear. It's a fabulous pattern. It's quite simple in its aesthetic. It's got a slight funnel neck to it. It's got the kind of rib all over, and I can imagine it being just absolutely wonderful to wear. It's knit in DK weight yarn. In terms of sizing, it's a 35 inch up to around about a 53 inch, so there is potential for it to stretch on the basis that it is a ribbed sweater, but at the same time, obviously in terms of inclusivity, it's okay, could be a little bit better, but certainly in terms of the style, the aesthetic of the sweater, I really do like it. And the Pommy Knitter, I will say that your version in particular is absolutely gorgeous, so very good work there. Another knitter from down under who has hit it out of the park this week is Elle Crislow, who posted her version of the Graphica sweater by Casapinka. Again, I will include a picture of that over here on the screen. Is this not the most joyful sweater that you have seen in quite some time? I love it. It is all over colour work, therefore making it an incredible feat, let alone it just being just beautiful to look at. The original version I think was only knit in 2 colours, which is part of why this version caught my eye. I love that it is as bright and vibrant as it is. It is knit, I believe, in DK weight yarn. Let me check that. Yep, it is knit in DK weight yarn. In terms of sizing, it ranges from a 30-inch up to a 58-inch, and therefore pretty solid. But I will certainly say that, yeah, just the pure joy of this project and the fact that it is something just so incredibly vibrant is definitely what caught my eye. And so excellent job on this front too. The next thing that caught my eye was, lo and behold, a shawl. And I know that doesn't happen very often, but it is a truly beautiful shawl. I'll put it up here on the screen for you to see. This is a shawl that was knit by, I think it's R.L. Matthews. Apologies if I've misunderstood how best to pronounce that. I think that's how I'm due to say it. But this is the Kindness Cal shawl by Yala Spiro. Again, all with the DK weight at the moment. This is knit out of hedgehog fibres in the merino DK base, and again, beautiful blues, fabulous neutral. I really enjoyed some of the changes in texture and design in this. It just looks like such a fun knit. And again, really appreciate you posting it over here in the group. It's a pattern that I hadn't seen previously, and so great to be able to draw some attention to it, and a fabulously executed shawl, and I hope you love it. I mean, I've picked a shawl, I might as well pick some socks as well, right? I know, before you think that I've been taken over by aliens and they're somehow inhabiting my body, let me be very clear. These are socks with a difference, because these are socks that are actually secretly a sweater. I know. Jay Conklin over on Ravelry has posted her own version of her Zweig socks. I'll put the picture up on here. You will see that it starts to make sense now. She used some of the pattern and the lace and colour work that was included in her Zweig sweater to make herself some matching socks, and I fucking love this idea so much. One, because I love my Zweig. It is one of my favourite sweaters that I've knitted. And 2, just credit to you for the inspiration. That's a genius idea. They look so fantastic, and I love the inspiration that's gone into these. So excellent work all around there. And on the subject of socks, I saw these pop up in the feed and they made my heart sing. Pitzelle, and I think that's how you pronounce it, apologies if it's not, I'll put her picture up here. She has recently completed a pair of socks knit in Tiny Human Knits yarn in the dunderknit rainbow colourway, and this makes me so happy. Aside from the fact that it feels like some kind of crazy meta loop of it's dunderknit socks in the dunderknit group in the dunderknit, like, it just feels so kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. I love it. But it makes me so happy. The socks are beautiful. She's used fabulously just perfect contrasting colours for her heels, toes and cuffs in there as well. I just absolutely adore these socks. Thank you so much for posting them. They make my heart very happy indeed. So those are really just a few of the projects that caught my eye this month. There are, to be honest, so many more that I want to call out, but I will be sitting here for hours. And I am really getting quite warm now, so I might have to bring it to a bit of a close. But what I would say is, as ever, thank you so much for posting over in the Ravelry group. Please continue to show us your actual knits as you're working on them, and they will continue to inspire not only me but hopefully everyone and anyone who is in that group. And yeah, I love the fact that we're able to keep this kind of perpetuous, vicarious circle ongoing. There is just one more thing that I wanted to mention on this week's podcast. It's something I referenced very briefly in passing a few weeks back and then promptly forgot to say anything about later on. I mentioned something about using a specific sachet of moth repellent here in my craft room, and indeed I have a couple of them kind of tucked in to various different bits of the stash, but I didn't actually mention at the time what version it was, so I thought I would bring that to your attention here. This is the brand of moth repellent that I use. It is a company called Modelli. It is based in Italy, and so in terms of whether or not these are easy to get in the US, I'll confess I'm not too sure. I do also have some cedar cubes that are peppered kind of in the various different cubby holes, but this is probably my first line of defense, if you want to call it that. What you get are these. They come in 2 different sizes, as I mentioned. This is the hanging version technically, but let's be honest, I'm not going to hang it. I'm going to tuck it in here somewhere. But it is the Bouquet Ver scent. And in terms of what is in Bouquet Ver, it has top notes of refreshing lime, bamboo and green leaf, giving way to the heart of lotus and jasmine blossom, all complemented with a base of cedar wood and musk. Love a bit of musk. Anyway, but yeah, I will say I actually really like the smell of these. There are some of them that I've come across that I just thought, yeah, it's not for me. Whereas this one, because it's a little bit fruity, it's got the lime in there, it's got the cedar wood, the sort of woody notes to it, the musk. I don't know why that's entertaining me as much as it is, but I really like the way that these smell. So this gets tucked into some little cubby holes. This little sort of dark window section at the bottom, after about 3 to 4 months, comes up with a little sign that says end. If it says end, it means that it's time for me to bin it and replace it with a new one. I don't necessarily think there's anything out there that is completely foolproof, I will say that, but I will say that combined with the fact that I have no carpets in this house, with the exception of the stairs carpet, everything is wooden floors. I don't have any rugs. I will say that I am reasonably sort of moth free. If I do see them in and around the house, they tend not to live for much after that point in time. Sorry, not sorry. And I have a couple of pheromone traps, which are the ones with the sort of sticky coating peppered around the house as well. I do check my stash fairly regularly. You should always check your stash regularly, in more ways than one. But it just means that I will kind of trawl through it on occasion, turn over a couple of the skeins, make sure that everything is as it should be, and just do my best. And yeah, I think that is probably the best that I can do, in all honesty, but just wanted to mention this in passing because I did have a couple of folk asking about it. But there you have it. That is pretty much it for this week. Thank you all so much for coming back once again. If you did go through the section right up front around the conversations that we've been having around tolerance and inclusivity, and you're still here and you're still committed to following the podcast, again, I am so delighted to have you with me. I do want to make it clear just exactly where I stand. I think it's important to be transparent about these things, but at the same time, I also want to make it very, very clear that we are not finished yet. There is a long way for us to go in terms of creating those safer, more welcoming and inclusive spaces, and I want to ensure that I'm doing what I can over here on Knitting Vicariously. So I really do hope you're all well. I hope the month of June has been good to you. I hope the first half of this year has been good to you. Fucking hell. And I just hope that, as ever, you have a wonderful rest of day, rest of week. I hope your knitting is keeping you happy and fulfilled, but if for whatever reason it isn't, I hope you have the opportunity to knit vicariously. Keep on keeping on, and I will see you again next time. Bye. I mean, come on. Can we just talk about how amazing this is? It just keeps going. In terms of span, let's talk wingspan, okay? So this is 1, this is 2, dear God, this is 3.5 spans, 3.5 full arm spans. This is, kids could use this as jump rope spans. Right, just, give me a second. Let me just, ow, don't get it stuck on my neck. Can we, if I'm going to strangle myself, I'm going to do it on camera. This is how committed I am to my podcasting art, right? And that goes round there, and yeah, no Hobbs, no, this is not a choice, no. Right. I mean, bollocks to it. I want to use this as a scarf. I want to use this as the most joyful, joyful cowl there has ever been. And if I do end up strangling myself with it, it will be for the sake of beauty and colour and all things knitwear related. And if putting it on wasn't enough, can you just, you know, you can hear the music, can't you? It's full on da 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 da. Da 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 da. I'm gonna be here for a while. Da. Oh god, oh god, oh god. No, this isn't sexy anymore. This is just terrifying. Keeping it sexy, people. Keeping it sexy. Oh wow.